Hi, welcome to the LA Asian Pacific Film Festival presented by Visual Communications. My name is Isiel Borlasa. I'm one of the programmers here at the festival, and I am zooming in from the 562 in Long Beach, California. And in my little part to disrupt colonial structures, I want to acknowledge the original folks who have, or the original stewards of this land, the Tongva and the Quiche nations. Here at the festival, we'd like to thank everyone for making this whole event possible, especially the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, Sony Pictures Entertainment, Comcast NBC Universal, California Arts Council, SAG-AFTRA Industry Advancement and Cooperative Fund, the National Endowment for the Arts, and HBO and Warner Media. And special thanks to all of our community partner orgs for the valuable work that they do and for continuing to support visual communications and programs just like this. Today we're going to get into a fabulous conversation with one of my favorite features here at the festival called Tokyo Hula. Before we get into that, I want to make sure that we invite our guests who are here with us to go ahead and introduce themselves. I'll go ahead and pass the mic and I'll start with you, Lisette.
Aloha mai kako, everyone. My name is Lisette, and I am the director and producer of Tokyo Hula, and I'm really, really excited to be sharing the film with everyone at the LA Asian Pacific Film Festival.
Thank you. And we'll pass the mic to Seiko-san.
Aloha, everyone. My name is Seiko Okamo. I'm a kumohula of Namamu Kaleinani, the hula halau, situated in Tokyo, Japan. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you so much for being here. And also we have a guest, one of my favorite humans, Junko. Introduce yourself, please.
Hi, everyone. I'm Junko Goda, and I will be assisting in this conversation. I look forward to it. Thanks.
Arigatou gozaimasu. So before we get into the conversation, I do want to formally read your bio, Lisette, if I can. Just I want our audiences to know that as an independent filmmaker and a hula dancer, Lisette Marie Flannery creates documentary films that celebrate the modern renaissance of hula dance and Hawaiian culture. She is a writer, producer, and director of Lehua Films, and her first documentary, American Aloha, Hula Beyond Hawaii, received the Cine Golden Eagle Award, and when it aired on the critically acclaimed POV series on PBS in 2003. Her award-winning film, which is one of my favorite films in my life, Nakamele, The Men of Hula, featuring the legendary Hawaiian master hula teacher and entertainer Robert Casimiro, screened in numerous film festivals, including ours, and it won Best Documentary at LA Asian Pacific Film Festival. Is that right, Lisette?
I can't remember, but it sounds good.
It sounds cool to me too. But then in her other film, One Voice, which follows the young song directors at the Kamehameha School's Song Contest, was nominated for an Emerging Director Award, again, here at LA Asian Pacific Film Festival. This final film, Tokyo Hula, is the final film of a trilogy of award-winning documentaries directed and produced by Lisette, and it, again, centers modern renaissance of hula traditions in Hawaii and abroad. So thank you for joining us. I also want to welcome formally Seiko of, how do you pronounce your halau, Seiko-san? Halau
Namamu o Kaleinani.
Thank you so much for saying that. Now, I want to begin with the subject of hula. That's really what kind of begins all of this storytelling. Lisette, in your bio, I've read that you are a dancer and you've been practicing for years. Can you tell us how you started to, get into the practice of hula and how it informs your work as a filmmaker?
Well, I was born and raised on the continent. I moved all over the place almost every year as I was growing up. And my family came back to Hawaii, where my mom is from, here in Honolulu, Hawaii. So my connection to hula really started when I was probably like a teenager. I would just take hula classes just for fun. And, my mom dances, but she says she can't remember anything, but I know that's not true. And when I was in New York City, I had gone to NYU Film School, and I had passed a shop in Soho and saw that they offered hula lessons in New York. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool to find a way to connect back to Hawaii here in New York City? So I really didn't kind of seriously start taking hula until I was living in New York for about 20 years. And that kind of led me to look for a more kind of traditional studies, and I found Kumu Patrick Mukuokane, who was featured in American Aloha Huli on Hawaii, and he eventually became my my kumu. And yeah, you know, things are so intertwined, right? And I feel like while I was sort of dancing in New York, I was connected to a halau in San Francisco, and always making films back here in Hawaii, and you know, ended up kind of coming full circle and moving back here to teach at the film school at the Academy for Creative Media at University of Hawaii. So Hula has always sort of been a way for me to kind of connect to family, to connect to, you know, my sort of, it feels like home to me, even though I felt kind of rootless as a young person, kind of just floating from place to place, all around Los Angeles and San Francisco and Pacific Northwest. So yeah, that's sort of how I kind of got interested in hula.
I think, you know, I'm Filipino from California, and hula is definitely present in sort of our neighborhoods here in California. It seems, from my observation, hula is almost an invitation to understand the kingdom of Hawaii and sort of understand the practices and the tradition. And I think that's something that we see. It comes from Hawaii all the way to Japan to find Seiko. Seiko, how did you discover, or how did you come into the practice of hula?
ゆうこさんお願いします。
はい。
はい。私は、1983年に、ハワイ島の高校に留学しました。当時、日本は、まだホノルル、ワイキキしか知らないような時代でして、その時にまだあんまり、もう本当に未開拓なハワイ島がすごくこう日本のみんなにとっては新鮮で、そして、そこで両親がゴルフに行ったり、いろいろしてたところに、ハワイの学校を見つけ、私が15の時にハワイに、移りました。そしてその時の体育の授業ですかね、そういうクラブ活動で初めてフラに触れて、なんかよくわからなかったんですけど、やっててなんか楽しいなぐらいの感じで、フラを始め、そしてその後は、大学はカリフォルニアの方の、サンフランシスコの方に、移ったんですけれども、その時はフラのことは全くお休みをしていて、そしてその後に日本に帰って、就職をして、そして、日本の OL っていう。
一回ですか？OL のことまでですか、一旦。はい。で、ちょっと高校の時は高校での留学生ではなくて、ご両親。
いや、一人で留学しました。
ですよね。はい、ありがとうございます。Well, first, in 1983, I arrived in Hawaii as a high schooler. And at that time, you know, it's 1983, so for someone coming from Japan, when you said Hawaii, it was, you know, Waikiki and Honolulu, and that was about it. And also the landscape was also completely different than what it is today. And so at that time I was 15, and being a high schooler, hula was part of one of the clubs and part of gym classes. So that's how I was first exposed to hula. And then after that, I attended college in San Francisco. And during that time, I didn't have any hula, but I do remember in high school that, you know, experiencing hula was a really happy experience. Seiko-san, お願いします. She's going to go into post high school now. or post college now. お願いします.
はい。日本の OL さんは、結構仕事帰りにお稽古をするという習慣があって、そして私も何か、やってみたいなと思った時に、高校の時に習ったフラがあったと思って、また再び日本で始めたんですね。そしたら日本のスタイルのフラっていうのはまたとっても楽しかったけれども、全然自分が高校でやってたものとは違うもので、これは私は自分の経験を生かして、もう一回フラに、今度はディープに、 探っていきたいという思いと、それからやっぱり、自分はこうアメリカで育ったせいもあって、ハワイにまた戻ってみたいなという気持ちがあって、それでまたハワイ大学に入り直して、ハワイ語を勉強しながら、今度はフラ留学を、したのが1996年ですね。5年と6年ぐらいで、3年間ぐらいして、ハワイのハラウに入りまして、そしてクムフラアロハタレリーとの出会いがあって、そしてその後日本に戻り、ハワイのスタジオ、フラのスタジオを東京に開くという経過です。
So after attending university in San Francisco, I went back to Japan, where I was what you call in Japan an office lady. Just an admin job. And what's very common is to have some sort of class or something to go to after work. And so I remembered what it was like in high school, so I ended up choosing Hula. But when I was attending hula classes in Japan, I found it really different from what I had experienced when I was 15. So I decided, just based on my own personal experience, to take a deeper dive into hula, and I had always wanted to go back to Hawaii. So I actually re-enrolled, went back to school to study, and so then let's see, and then by 19ごめんなさい、1996年には
95年ですね。
95年です。
はい、はい。
1995年にはフラには完璧復帰っていう。
ハワイに留学をしました。また。
はい。And then so by 1995 is when I actually went back to college, to university in Hawaii. It was 1995. And then that was my rest of my journey to Halau and Kumu, and then coming back to Japan and starting my own studio in Tokyo.
That's a spectacular story of how you've incorporated a culture that's not yet your own into your life. I'm going to bring the question back to bring a question to Lisette. It seems to be it's a sort of similar trend of different women kind of stumbling onto hula, or the women in Japan that found hula. It's begins as an extracurricular in their life, and then it becomes a deeper connection as they become more bonded to their halau. How did you find this halau in particular? Like, there's something special about finding the timeline of the story that you tell with Kumuhula Lopaka and their relationship to the halau. Like, how did you find them?
Well, with Kumu Lopaka and Kumu Saniching, I mean, they have been traveling and teaching in Japan for a very long time, and had started their own halau, but were kind of doing like almost like dual citizenship. Paka is always kind of back and forth and back and forth. This is pre-COVID times, obviously, that I'm talking about. Really kind of traveling every couple of weeks between Hawaii and Japan to teach. So I knew about them, but in terms of finding Seiko, I had actually, I think it was at the King Kamehameha Hula competition here in Honolulu, which had a lot of representation of halau from Japan, had heard her chant and seen her halau perform, and I could tell that she had training and was very different than some of the other groups that I had seen. And so I started to research and try to find out more about Seiko. And when I learned that she was studying under Aloha Deliri, who is one of just a hula goddess as far as I'm concerned, I was like, oh, this makes a lot of sense. I'm very curious about how that relationship has influenced her teaching in Japan. And the way I kind of met her was through going on this Pan-Pacific Hula exhibition tour with Kumu Robert Casimiro from Kamale, the Men of Hula, and Kumu Patrick Mukuokani. There was a bunch of Hawaiian Kumu Hula who would tour Japan and do a show in all these different cities. So I was interested in meeting people and talking to people while I was in Japan with them. And Seiko was one of the folks who was gracious enough to let me come and sit down and talk story a little bit and propose documentary.
Oh, well, I'll bring the question to Seiko-san. how did you feel when Lisette wanted to follow you around with a camera and do a documentary with you?
I was really, really honored and shocked.
Did it feel
But
weird to have the camera follow you around?
first, I felt a little bit uncomfortable because I was not really used to it, used to the situation being filmed every time. And I tried to look nice and I tried to say good things, which is not a regular myself. But they just kept on rolling the film and I kind of like forgot that it's been rolled. And then when I realized it was real me, screaming and yelling and
Well, I think that's what I love about documentary film is when you know that the person on the camera kind of forgot that the camera is there. And for Lisette, in this film and in all of your films in particular, I'm always moved by how you capture these like practice moments, like people kind of like half marking their, I mean, I'm not a dancer myself, I used to cheer. So I know when people aren't doing their stuff full out or they're kind of practicing in their head. I guess, you know, how much time did you spend with these dancers so that they could start forgetting that you're in the room a little bit? Like, maybe how many hours of footage did you shoot with them?
Wow. Well, I always tend to shoot a lot. Lots of rehearsals, and usually, you know, I came back and forth a few times to Japan, so it was different time periods, and usually, you know, kind of leading up to competition when things get very, very tense, I end up spending more time, and that's when everyone is very focused on competition, so they really do forget that you're there. And I think because I'm also a dancer, like I know what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
Like I can kind of very much so read a room when you're in a rehearsal and you're listening to your kumu, and you're reacting to you know, what they're telling you to do, and you're trying to get it right, but you know, just not quite there yet. And it's very it's super fun because you can see all these just wonderful moments, right, where everyone is just kind of doing their very, very best, especially for competition. And somehow it all comes together, right? It doesn't seem like it, like that dress rehearsal before a big competition is always really stressful. And then magical things happen, you know, once they get out on stage.
Well, you captured a lot of different performance types of scenes in the film. It's not all competition and it's not all just practice for competition. Like one of the scenes or the kind of vignettes I love is when the Halal does the charity event, and then the story becomes pinpointed on this woman and how her sisters kind of come together and, you know, and support her in her town. Can you tell us, like, I imagine that was sort of like a documentary gem that kind of popped up and you're like, yeah, I'm gonna go follow them to this charity event. Tell us a little bit about that process.
That was an idea from Shimeko san, who wanted to go and return to her hometown where she was from because it had been Ishinomaki Prefecture, I think. It had been devastated by the tsunami and earthquake that had hit Japan. And she had kind of gone to her halau and her kumu and said, let's do a big fundraiser. Let's try and raise as much money as we can. And then I want to personally go and give it to the mayor of the town and personally connect with those folks who are so really suffering and living in temporary housing. And, you know, I think that for me, when we were shooting, she was very emotional, very, very overcome. And everyone was, even the mayor, that very kind of, you know, official mayoral guy was, you know, very touched by the gesture. And I think that, you know, to see that kind of demonstration of emotion, to cry publicly, was something that you don't really see every day in Japan. And so it was very moving. And I think a couple of the folks that we were traveling with who were assisting with translation were really like, wow, I never see someone cry publicly like that. that was very, very moving. So, you know, for our crew, it was a chance to, for me personally, I mean, it was very different. You know, when you see something covered in the news and stuff like that, it was just a very, very, it was a devastating kind of emotional roller coaster to kind of go back and talk with some of these folks who just lost everything. But we're just really grateful to be alive and with their family members. So in a way, we felt like we were sort of showing, you know, kind of a more intimate side of it and less like a journalistic kind of portrayal of what had happened.
I'm so glad that you said intimate, because my next question is, when I was watching it like the second time, how many people were you on your shoot? Like every time you go to Japan, it feels like it's just Lisette, because it's so quiet, like the way you are in the room with them. But like, there's a lot of coverage. So how many humans or did you clone yourself?
No, super tiny crew. I like working with very small crews, and it was two of the same crew members that I'd worked with on One Voice, so we knew each other really, really well. My director of photography, Brian Wilcox, and my production sound mixer, John McFadden. Brian is from Utah, John is from here in Honolulu. And then my hula sister, Hatsumi, from New York, was my associate producer, my translator, and basically my fixer in Japan, because as you can tell, I don't speak Japanese at all. And I'm pretty much just lost in Tokyo, just wandering around with no idea where I am. So that kind of small crew, really, we covered a lot of ground. We were all over Tokyo. We were on the subways dragging equipment day and night. And we had a lot of fun kind of exploring Japan together and, you know, just hanging out with really wonderful people. So just small, kind crew always. I don't like big crews where I think that kind of tends to shape how people behave and act. And I felt like these guys were like family almost. So it made it really easy and super fun.
On that note, going to Seiko, do you remember like any stories of having them in the room and, you know, filming and maybe catching the real Seiko on camera?
すごく、コンペティションの、純子さんお願いしますね。
はい、大丈夫です。
コンペティションの前に、もう直前から撮影が始まって、だんだんこう緊張感が高まってくる中、もう、すっかりこう自分が撮影をね、されているっていうことよりも、もうコンペティションに向けて集中しなきゃっていう気分の時に、もう本当にリゼットさんね、ビューティフルパーソンなんですよね。すっごく、温かくって、なんかもう自分たちの応援団みたいな心で接してくださって、もうなんか、最後にはもう、私たちを応援してくれた家族みたいな気分で入れたので、結構私もわがまま言ったり、今はちょっとやめてとか、なんかこうすごくこう打ち解けて、撮影ができたことをすごく覚えてます。
So, the camera started rolling right before the competition. And, you know, tensions rising. And of course, I'm starting to focus on the competition. So I completely forget that the camera's rolling. And Lisette, as you all might have just heard, Lisette is a beautiful, warm person. And she was like our cheerleader. And so, you know, cheerleader / family. And so, you know, there might have been times when I could have been curt with Lisette or said stop. But I was, you know, at the end of the day, I'm really glad I shared such like intimate conversations and intimate space with Lisette.
I mean, I remember celebrating after the competition. That was a big party. So that was like super fun. And, you know, Seiko, you were always really great. I don't know how many rough cuts you saw of this film, you know, over the years, but I appreciate you having faith that I would actually finish the film. You know, you saw a million different iterations of this. So, you know, I never really saw, Seiko never really lost her cool ever. I'll be honest with you. I've seen a lot of kumu in my day. And she never really went too crazy or anything.
On that note, I'm curious if the Japanese subjects, have they seen the film and what their reaction has been? I mean, the film has been out on the festival for a bit. You've screened all over the world. Have the subjects in Japan seen it, and what are their thoughts?
That is such an interesting question. You know, the film actually premiered at the Yamagata International Documentary Film Festival, and it was the same weekend that there was a massive typhoon last year. It was crazy. So I couldn't make it. My associate producer couldn't make it. My editor somehow made it up there, but it was extremely difficult. So it has not played in Japan as much as I would like it to. And with the pandemic, everything has really kind of been put on hold in terms of getting it into Japanese theaters. But I'm still working on it. I'm still committed to figuring out a way to make sure that Tokyo Hula has a better homecoming, and that, you know, all the fans and the folks in Japan who dance hula, I think, would really enjoy watching the film.
When it's unfortunate that we couldn't present in person, but when we originally invited the film, we envisioned it to be in Little Tokyo. A lot of like our sansei who also dance hula, or maybe from Hawaii, like we wanted all those aunties to kind of celebrate and be there. And we knew that there was going to be like an auntie, like maybe halau, that would come and celebrate the film. And hopefully, if we have a chance to gather in person, we'd love to have the film on screen, have that moment with us, and maybe Seiko, you could come. If I have money to bring you out, I'll bring you all the way from Japan, and then I won't eat for the rest of my life. But
that'll be a big dream.
It's a big dream.
First of all, I hope the COVID-19 will fade away soon so that I can get out of Japan.
Well, I'm sorry, Lisette, you wanted to say something?
There's so many really excellent halau in Los Angeles. I mean, you guys are really, really lucky. There's a great Hawaiian community and Pacific Islander community out there.
A lot of them, I think, in sort of our early outreach, this was a title that they most sort of connected to, because I think, and this speaks to what I think is the feeling of this film, is that hula can kind of intersect cultures, right? I could be a Filipino from Long Beach, and I could learn a practice from a kumu. I haven't yet, but one day I will. Or it could, find, a halau in Japan and bring that strength over there. On that note, for you, Lisette, and maybe for you, Seiko, who's traveled, what has been the most surprising place or surprising culture that has celebrated hula, like outside of Hawaii and outside of Japan? I'll go with you, Lisette.
Definitely Mexico. I would say for me, like, I don't know a lot about it, but I'm so curious, like, how did hula become so popular in Mexico? If anyone knows, drop me an email, let me know. I'm not going to make a movie about it. I'm not going to make any promises, but I'm very, very curious to hear how, I've seen different halau from Mexico come here to Hawaii for things like hula conferences and things like that. So they're very, very active, and they do have some ties with Hawaiian kumu hula here in Hawaii. And, hula's everywhere, all over Europe, Paris, Germany, Austria, all over the place. So it's kind of super, super global at the moment.
Yeah, I agree. How about for you, Seiko? What's been the most interesting place where you have seen hula?
Besides Japan and Hawaii?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know.
What about China and Korea? It's in China now, yeah?
I've heard so, but not really. Maybe. Korea, maybe. But I'm not really sure.
Yeah, I heard some rumors too, but I don't know that much.
Yeah.
No, hula's definitely, it's it's such an inviting practice that people want to celebrate. And what I most love about the halau that you feature, Lisette, is that there's an in, an intention to understand the history and the legacy behind the actual moves. And I think that's the most sort of one of my takeaways from the film, that it's not just a dance. And you teach this too, Seiko, in the film, like it's not just the words, like there is mana behind it. You have to understand that. I guess in addition to that, Lisette, what do you hope audiences will take away when they see the film?
I think that for me, like some of the things that I found sort of interesting that I had never really kind of thought about before, like how there were challenges, that these students have to kind of overcome in order to really sort of fully embrace a hula lifestyle. So it's not just, of course, they're very dedicated in learning Olelo Hawaii, learning the language, learning the history, really kind of figuring out how intertwined culture and the dance actually, are. But they also had these kind of cultural challenges in terms of, being able to smile or being able to move their hips so much. Things that we kind of just take for granted and we think are super easy are extremely difficult for, some of these Japanese students to kind of, and they work so hard at perfecting or improving themselves that, I sometimes feel like that diligence and that hard work is something that maybe we need to raise our game a little bit and not take things for granted so much. So yeah, that's what I would hope, that the people really kind of understand the level of dedication and the hard work that some of these folks are really putting in to their study of hula.
How about you, Seiko? After people watch this film, what do you want people to know about your halau and the practice of hula in Japan?
ジュコさんお願いします。このフィルムをね、撮った時っていうのはもう、6年ぐらい前なんですけれど、6、7年ぐらい前の話なんですけれども、その時の日本はまだすごくコンペティションがね、主流と言ったら、いろんなイベントだったり、コンペティションだったり、外で披露するっていうフラがすごく、活発に行われていたんですけれども、このタイミングなのでいいタイミングでいいかなと思うんですけど、コロナのね、コロナが始まって、そして、日本も一回すべてが止まって、そして私たちは6月からまたレッスンを再開してるんですね。で、レッスンを再開しながらみんなこうまたマスクをつけて、私もマスクをつけて、生徒さんもマスクをつけて、ハハしながらレッスンしてるんですけど、そうすると顔が隠れちゃって、またスマイルの仕方を忘れてしまうんですね。で、日本人は本当にスマイルが苦手なので、本当にスマイルをどうやってやったらいいかっていう教室が映画の中でもフィーチャーされたぐらいね、しっかりこう歯を開いて開けるっていうようなことが苦手なので、今度はね、今マスクしてるので、目と眉毛、頭の顔の半分でどうやったら笑顔が表現できるかっていうことをフラを通じてやったりとか、もっとこう日常生活に寄り添えるようなフラがこれからはまた日本に、今はイベントとかも全部ありませんし、コンペティションも全部お休みです。で、少し日本人のフラに対する意識であったり、接し方であったりっていうのがコロナで変わっていくんじゃないかな。私はそれを結構精神性を大切にするフラがこれからはもっともっと日本の人たちに価値を感じてもらえるんじゃないかなって思ってます。長くてごめんなさい。
大丈夫です。So when the documentary was filmed, it was about 6-7 years ago. And at that time, there was a lot of competitions, and Japan was generally a very active hula scene then. But looking at the current timing with Corona, we actually started, we commenced classes again in June, and we're all wearing masks. So we are, we're breathing hard and practicing, but we have our masks on. And our concern right now is our students forgetting how to smile, which is addressed in the film. So now our new challenge is, how do you express that you are smiling through your eyes and eyebrows, that top half of your face? So yeah, so on top of this right now, it's I guess a form of silver lining is that Corona has made us kind of stop and think, and self-care has gotten important during this time. And because Hula has that power to, connect yourself back to yourself, I'm hoping that Hula will be something a little bit more just kind of an everyday existence amongst Japanese. That they can take the time to reflect for themselves and take care of themselves.
That's very beautiful. Thank you, Seiko. And I think that leads us into our final question. 2020 is a surprising year, and I'm very, very thankful that you've shared this film Lisette with us, and I'm thankful that Seiko is here to have the conversation. But what's next for you? We'll begin with Seiko, and then I'll get to Lisette afterwards. So what's next for you, Seiko?
まず、近々のことにして、近々の件は、通常のレッスンに加えて、今までね、そういうイベントだったり、コンサートとかが全部閉まっていたものが、今は無観客で、オンラインで、コンサートっていうのをやり始めています。なので、そういうステージに11月からまた頻繁に出ていくような形になります。ただまだちょっと状況がね、わからないということで、まだ今のところは様子見な感じですかね。
So what I can share for at least what we're planning in our near future is, currently we're having lessons, and since there's no concerts, no events, we've actually are looking into putting it online. And we are hoping that we're right now eyeing November for it, but currently we're just, seeing how things go with everything in the world.
Thank you. And Lisette, what's next for the film and for you?
What's next for the film is it's going to be playing at the Guam International Film Festival, and it's nominated for a Grand Jury Award, which is super exciting. So wish I could go to that fest, but it'll be, I think, on PBS Guam. And then it'll also be at the Philadelphia Asian American Film Festival on the East Coast. And I just finished the PBS cut down version. I cut this film down to an hour so it can air on PBS next year as a part of the Pacific Heartbeat series in, I believe, May. And then, I'm always kind of running around and supporting filmmakers here in Hawaii, and I'm kind of using this opportunity with everything that's happening right now in the world with the pandemic to write a little bit more and think about that next project. This is, Tokyo Hula is the third film in the trilogy, so I am closing the door, so to speak, on the Hula trilogy. But, of course, I think, I'm not going to rule out that my films won't somehow be connected to Hula or Hawaiian culture. And we'll see. I'm excited. This was it took me a very long time to finish this film, so I'm just really happy to be able to share it with audiences in any way that I can right now.
We're certainly thankful that you're sharing it with us. And again, it's the bittersweet silver lining that Seiko-san can join us on Zoom for this post-screening conversation. But that brings it to the end for us. If you enjoyed this conversation and if you enjoyed the film, please consider donating to Visual Communications. Your support keeps the whole organization going all throughout the year so that we can continue bringing more programming just like this for you. Don't forget, this film is available right now. You can see it on our watch site. It'll be available for you to watch until Sunday evening. And then after that, you'll have to wait for another festival near you, possibly. And finally, to keep an eye on our festival website for more film schedules and more panel talks, go to festival.bcmedia.org and follow us on social media. And don't forget to use the hashtag LAAPFF 2020. Mahalo and goodbye.
Mahalo, thank you.